Hi, welcome to Jeremy's Tech Channel, and today we're going to talk about a hypothesis I have between Mac and Linux. So today we're going to take a look at a hypothesis that I've got paralleling some things that I experienced with Apple and Mac to Linux today. Now, a couple of caveats here. One, I'm not going to be talking about other things outside of the desktop space. So I'm not going to be talking about iOS, although iPhones will be a part of the discussion. And I'm not going to be talking about the server space, which obviously Linux just dominates. I'm specifically talking about the desktop space today. I've been thinking about some things, and I'm looking at the trajectory that Mac went through, and I'm seeing some parallels with Linux. Now, let me explain and just understand this is just an opinion. It's a hypothesis. I don't, other than the data I'm going to, walk through with you and what we know, it's just conjecture at this point. Why not think this way? Why not take a look and see? Back in the early 2000s, turn of the century, Mac was using Power PCs. Apple moved from PowerPC to Intel in 2005. So 2005 happens. They moved to Intel. The big piece of that was they were now able to run any kind of software applications that were on the x86 architecture. That was a big deal. So that meant that customers could get Microsoft Office. They could also run Parallels and dual boot their system with Windows or Mac. And that was appealing back in the day. And that seemed to really get the ball rolling. Once again, I'm going to show you this here. At around 2001, 2002, they were down to a 2% market share. And all the way, in 1980, they had 16% all the way down here. And you see that it started climbing back up. This chart only goes through 2013. But this point here, this curve going back up is interesting to me because I remember when this happened, and I remember using an Apple at school, in elementary school, thinking they were cool and all, but we used Commodore 64s and started coming out with Windows 98 computers and Windows 95 computers. I remember those too. That was where we were at. That, Mac was just kind of like a school thing, at least in my experience. And once again, I was, growing up as a kid through most of that. We get through this piece here, and I'll go back to this chart because in 2007, the iPhone comes out. This is all relative to my hypothesis, so please stick with me as we get through this in my hypothesis with Linux moving forward. And I'm hoping to see some parallels here, not parallels like Apple, but parallels between the two. You see in 2007, that is when the iPhone came out. The first iPhone was released June 29th, 2007. Ever since that point, Mac has been really getting into this space and eating away at the desktop market share. Now, however you feel about Apple, however you feel about Mac and all of those things and the very closed nature of it, that's not a part of this discussion right now. Maybe we can have that discussion at another time. But for this discussion, I just wanted to show this point in Mac's history where Windows was so overwhelmingly dominant, and they still are. They were so overwhelmingly dominant that Apple had to change their approach. In between the Intel change and the iPhone coming out, that were the two pieces that were the catalyst to move Apple forward. What I'm about to say is not that all of a sudden Linux is going to have a Linux phone. You might have seen my videos earlier, and there are some Linux phones that are being worked on. That's not the parallel that I'm going to draw. But I'm going to draw a parallel with two pieces because what happened was users that wouldn't have considered Mac before are now able to consider it at that point. They weren't able to consider it before because they needed Microsoft Office at the time. That was a big piece of the puzzle. Also, they started getting these iPhones and wanting to be able to have a convergent ecosystem between the two. Apple obliged. Where's the parallel here between Linux and Apple? Obviously, they are nothing alike except for their Unix file structure, right? They're a part of the same family. They would show up at the same family reunion, the Unix family reunion. but they really don't know each other. It's like showing up to a family reunion and not knowing, more than half the people there, right? I understand that part. They're not much alike other than that roots in Unix, okay? I understand. But there is something happening today that is reminding me and making me feel like I did 15 years ago. And there's two things to parallel. One is with Proton coming out and Wine and this compatibility layer. Gamers who are wanting to either eke out a couple more frames per second or wanting to game on Linux just because they use Linux, they are able to. Proton is a layer that is allowing for compatibility that was not available before. There are Windows games you are able to play, and in a lot of cases, you are able to play better than on a Windows computer with something that wasn't even native to Linux. They are just using that Proton layer, and now they're able to play games like Apex Legends on their Linux computer. That's a big deal. So now the viewpoint of what is limiting me is less. So there's parallel one. Parallel two is the Steam Deck. Whether you see the Steam Deck as the second coming, I've seen some people super excited about the Steam Deck. And I've seen some people that are like, it's not ready yet. And I haven't seen too many of those, but you will see them out there. They don't have the full library out yet. Some of the compatibility with, some of the input methods still need to be worked out and hashed out. But either way, the system's sold out. And so I'm paralleling the Steam Deck with iPhone. Why do those two things seem to be a catalyst to me? Even as of a couple of years, I've been keeping my eye out on Linux. I've been keeping my eye out and seeing what is going on. Even though I wasn't regularly using it, there is a swelling, if you will. I know some of you have been in the Linux space for more than a couple years. You've been hearing it's the year of the Linux desktop for years now. That's not what I'm talking about per se, but what I am saying, because of Steam Deck, and Steam Deck, if you are aware of what the Steam Deck has available, the Steam Deck will allow for someone to be able to game with their gaming operating system front end, and then they could access a desktop environment with KDE and with Flatpaks, and they are able to use that system as a desktop computer. It's got a USB-C port in the back. They can plug in a keyboard and mouse and a monitor, and it's super cool. They can do that. So now you have someone who is getting introduced to Linux because SteamOS is it's a Linux distribution. This is really, really cool. So now all of these people that are waiting and waiting and waiting, it's already been sold out. They tell me, at least what I've read, Q3 of this year, the third quarter, you might be able to get one. That means millions of units will have been sold by this point. And before I even try to get one, if I decide to, there's going to be millions and millions that will have been sold. And they keep making these updates, just like with the iPhone. So my hypothesis is that with Proton and with the Steam Deck, there is a potential for a catalyst for a growth in market share for Linux. And why is this good? Well, there's a couple reasons why it's good. One, the more users who are contributing and being a part of whether you're a person who's really into free and open source software, or whether you are a developer or a programmer and wants to be a part of this, or someone like me who just enjoys the experience and wants to be a part of it. All of us have a part to play, and the more of us that have a part to play in this, the better the system will be. That's just the way it goes. When you have a community-driven operating system, the community grows, and it should help. Now, we know that with Apple, that was a company driving things for profit, right? Linux is not driven by profit. I know there are companies that use Linux and open source software to their financial gain. I understand that, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. The more eyes that are brought before Linux, the more people are willing to try it. And why does this hypothesis hit me like this? I believe we are going to see a market share growth. Now, is it going to take over the world? I mean, it has in the server space, of course. I don't know. I don't think so, at least in this, time of Linux, but I do think it will grow. Imagine if the growth doubles. Okay, let's say that Linux grows to a 4% market share. Let's say that it doesn't grow to that, 8 to 12% market share like Apple did. Let's say it grows to 4%. That's twice the amount of users that are using it every day. And in my mind, and I'm hoping that all of us coming through and using it, that it will double the amount of progress that Linux is having. Now, I'm not talking about features and things like that. I'm not talking about, getting what you want in your Linux computer. I'm not talking about, having that I want mindset. I'm just talking about the actual experience itself. I could be way off base on this, but I think this is something to be ready for. If at any point in the next 2 to 4 years, Linux doubles in its user set, how much more resources are going to be available for Linux? I think that's cool. There is some divergence here. We talked about the fact that Apple is a company and wants to make money. Apple also produces hardware, so there was another divergent from the model and parallels that I was drawing. And Linux, honestly, that's just not their goal. That's not what we want. That's not what we're looking for. And I understand that. But how are we going to respond to having twice the amount of users? How are we as a community going to respond? How are we going to help? Are we going to push beginner distributions? Are we going to, decide to gain some standard? What are we going to do? And I think we should think through those things. And I don't have the answers. I shouldn't be speaking on that. I'm a new user, but I am an invested user. I am invested with my time and my effort. I wouldn't run anything else on this Dell G15 laptop. I wouldn't. I had Windows on it for 20 minutes and I couldn't wait to get it off. I hope you listen to this. It's supposed to help spark, conversation and thought so that we can be prepared as a community for what is coming. Like I said, 4% market share is twice the amount of users that are there now, which means twice the amount of forum comments and twice the amount of questions and twice the amount of read the you-know-what manual coming from the other side. And we've got to work together. If you're a free and open source zealot, you want people who are going to be connected to this with the same ideals. I get that. But in order to lead someone down the road, you're going to have to help us get there. And I just wanted to make you guys aware of something I've been thinking about. This may never happen. If Linux just sits there at 2%, 1% market share, we're all going to be happy and fine. I know that. We're going to be happy and fine. But with that Steam Deck, with that Proton layer, and with that niche set of users that might jump ship and come over. Also, I want to quickly point out that Windows 11 hasn't been the most well-received operating system for Windows. About that time, I just remembered this, about that time that everyone was moving over to Mac, moving away from Windows, there was the whole Vista thing happening, guys. Vista was horrible. Vista was bad for corporations. Vista was bad personally. It had some things that it was trying to move forward. I'm not fully bashing Vista, but it didn't go over well overall. And so this is another opportunity for us as a community to leverage people going, I don't like Windows 11. I don't like what it's doing. Well, let me show you an option here. Or they're going to get their Steam Deck and they're like, hey, how do I use this KDE thing? What is this desktop environment? What's a Flatpak? Let's be available. Let's be the kind of people that we should be in humanity. Let's be people that receive others and guide them through and get them to a place where they are going to be able to open up a terminal, not be scared, and update their system or change a directory. Or know what changing a directory means, Let's walk through these simple, small tasks. Because if we are a better community, ready and prepared for these new users that I hypothesize are coming in, we can grow a stronger community. And that's what I want with Linux. And I hope you do too. Leave comments below and let's see where this conversation goes. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow.